Hi, my name is Mark. This is my second novel, He Who Brings Death, A Major Crime in Florida. Today I'd like to read a passage from this, and I'm going to start on chapter 24. Natalie spent the early evening looking over the firefighter's phone log, trying to put a direction on our next steps. I told her what Danny Bradford had done, and she was pleased that I only had him cross things off of our list, rather than sending him into something we should investigate. She talked about how eager he was and how he reminded her of the way she was at his age. Having him on board will be a helpful conduit to the local sheriff's office, she said, almost like having our own police force to use as backup. Just like you talked about yesterday before we went into that bar. Until you just told me, I had no idea he was here today. I insisted he call in on a 2-hour schedule, I said. After he called the first time, he had to get ready for his shift. He said that he would call again if they found anything on the murder. Remember what we were looking at when you first woke up? Some of the numbers that match both calls and the text that Sebastian called irrelevant are the Keys area code. We should call them and see if anyone answers. That would be interesting, but don't do it from either of our phones, Natalie warned. Maybe we can pick up a burner tomorrow to do that. How many are there? Looks like 4 different numbers, I replied. Then Natalie added, that's the thing about Sebastian. He sets parameters and can process the hell out of something like no one I've ever met. But he really can't see anything outside of those parameters. He could see a gold ring inside of a basket of poisonous snakes and reach inside to prove he was right about it being in there. It wouldn't surprise me a bit if we find other things among his stuff that will be helpful. A little later, my phone rang and I said to Natalie, it's Sheriff Bradford. Hello, Sheriff. Any developments on the murder? Is Danny there with you? He isn't answering his phone. No, he's not here, I said. Can't you call him at the station? It's his day off, he replied. Sheriff Bradford, Danny called me and said he was getting ready for work. That was around noon. We were sick and didn't leave the house today. Was he working on something for you? He asked. He was only going to see if anyone could paint a boat in a couple of days' time. He told me that he had come up empty and had to get ready for his shift. The sheriff hung up. Natalie was holding her hand over her mouth like a squeak was trying to force itself out. Check and see exactly what time he called, she directed. 12:35, I replied. Wait, I don't think this is Danny's number. It does look familiar, though. I checked my directory and it was true. Danny called from a different phone. See if you recognize the number. Natalie looked and scowled as she thought, but her face lit up as she remembered something. She grabbed the list of Keys numbers we had written and planned to call when we got the burner phone. Here it is. The number Danny used called the lady firefighter 5 days before she disappeared. They must have called to tell her they had the boat. Danny Bradford couldn't be involved in that, I said. Could he? He's involved now, Natalie replied. There must be another explanation, I said. Natalie agreed that it was strange that this boy, who barely looked like he shaved yet, could be involved with drug smugglers and the disappearance of the firefighter. The only other explanation is that the smugglers are holding him to get to us, she said. Though I can't imagine why. Should we call the sheriff first, or should we call the number first? I had the feeling she already knew the correct answer, but I decided to humor her, so I said, we would be off the hook if we called Sheriff Bradford first. Mike, normally in my old life, I would have called the number first. Now I feel like I would rather be safe. Maybe you're not the only wuss in this relationship, she said. Very flattering, I said, as I called the sheriff. He thanked me for the information and hung up. Sorry about that wuss stuff. I guess I've used that joke enough, Natalie said. Now we have to wait. She was trying to make up with me based on the really nice things she was doing to my face and neck. I was definitely in the mood to forgive when my phone went off again. Mike, I called the number, but they must have blocked my phone. It didn't even go to voicemail, the sheriff said. Give it a few minutes and call it for me. He then just hung up. Natalie took charge and gave me a list of instructions based on the possible outcomes of the call. If it is a kidnapping, don't give much information. See what they want. But don't agree to anything until you talk to Danny. Try to make Danny talk. He'll probably try to give you a clue as to his whereabouts. At that moment, I remembered the tracing app on my phone that Danny had activated that morning. Look, Danny's phone is just a mile from here. It looks like it's just right outside the front gate of Venus Pass, I said. Someone must have been waiting for him there, and he ditched it to show us where this happened, Natalie said. What could anyone want with him, I asked, or with us, for that matter? Put your recording app on and put it on speaker, Natalie instructed. Listen to what they say and watch me. We can analyze the call after it is over for any clue that Danny tries to give. One more important tip, Mike. Don't act all pissy and antagonistic like you did the last time you were on one of these ransom calls during the case last year. You do remember, right? Of course, but that was you being held. I wasn't acting. I was pissy. I understand, but after that call, those guys talked about killing me on the spot. These types are volatile and don't really respond to bullying. Use your mind and your tact. Now make the call. Mr. Lyman, I presume, the man's voice said. I'm calling for Danny Bradford. Who is this? I asked. The young man is here with us, but he is tied up and can't come to the phone, the man said with amusement at his very old and stale joke. Well, just tell him I called and have him return the call when he is free, I said as Natalie rolled her eyes. Okay, smartass, here's the deal. You have something we want, and we have something you want. This good-looking young man. If you want this boy, we must trade. You know of what I speak, the man said. Please tell me, because honestly, I have no idea what you're talking about, I replied with a quizzical look to Natalie, who returned the same. You have my $100,000, the money that his stupido muscle-bound cop stole from me, he said. So you killed Stark for that little bit of money, I said? Natalie shook her head no with a big negative nod. It is more the principle involved, Mr. Lyman. What is the tenet? Take care of the pennies and the dollars will take care of themselves, he replied. I'm taking care of the pennies tonight. The money is in a safe deposit box in Marathon, I said as Natalie gave me an approving nod. We put it in there on our way down the other day. We can get it out when the bank opens in the morning. That is unfortunate, Mr. Lyman. This delay will cost the young man one of his toes. The next delay will cost a finger. And the third delay will make this beautiful boy alligator food, like the thief responsible for this unfortunate situation. Call this number back as soon as you have the red package. At 11 a.m., he loses a finger, the kidnapper said. Let me talk to him, Natalie nodded. No money if I don't know he's alive. I have to talk to him now, and if I am to get the money from the bank, and again tomorrow before I deliver it, wherever you are. If you spare his toe, I can also bring an extra $10,000 for your trouble, I said. Young Danny won't be able to talk right now, he said. I will send you a video as soon as we hang up. Please choose a number between 1 and 1,000. I looked at Natalie with a puzzled look, and she signaled that I should oblige. 513, I said, and the call was over. That was excellent, Natalie said. You pushed him enough to show you had backbone, but not enough to force him to violence. Nice work. One little problem, though. We don't have the money, I said as a text alert sounded on my phone. It was the video showing Danny tied up on a chair with a badly beaten face visible. Someone yelled in a very demanding way, "Say it!" Danny said 513. It appeared that he wanted to give a clue, but the video ended. Natalie was like a seasoned physician at the triage of a major accident. She wasted no time with discussion and immediately listened to the recording, pausing several times momentarily for evaluation. There, hear that, she said, with the volume all the way up. We could hear the men speaking Spanish briefly a couple of times. I noted the times. Then the detective said, There, hear that? I listened closely as she played it again. There was the sound of a bell, like a ship's bell that the crew would ring when someone comes aboard. I've heard that before, she said. Almost immediately it came to me first. That's the bell in the back door of the store. We both knew then that Danny was being held by the Cubans we had seen at the restaurant, and I had seen at the house on the corner. He was only 400 yards from our position. Call the sheriff now and I will get that stolen plate number, Natalie directed. We gave all of the information to Sheriff Bradford, but we didn't know the house number, so Natalie reminded him that it was the Swenson house. He told the sheriff that we had confirmed that there was a junker car that had a stolen plate, and he thanked us for what would have been sufficient for a warrant if this had been any other case. This was his son, and the man's wrath was evident over the phone. He wouldn't be seeking a warrant. Let's go get some beer at the store, Natalie said in the most matter-of-fact way. We'd better take firearms, I said. We're not going to get involved in this, Natalie replied, but it is better to be safe. She was pumped up and animated and surprisingly fast on her feet for someone who had been sick all day. The store was closed, as it always is at this time of the evening, and we couldn't get to the back entrance from the front door without swinging around the end of the fence where it meets the water at the seawall. Natalie did it as easily as a little girl showing off her cartwheels. and I made it without falling in. The house on our side was dark, except for the two lights on either side of the front doors I had seen before. The junk car was in the same spot. The fairly strong breeze off of the ocean brought the sound of the Latin music from the house to our ears. As we waited for the assault, I got a nagging feeling that something wasn't right, though I couldn't put my finger on it. Each time the breeze picked up, the music got louder. Natalie could tell I was bothered by something. "What's wrong?" she asked. "They'll be here in a while. It takes time to get an assault team together." Then it hit me. "Natalie, I think we have the wrong place." "No," she replied. "How is that possible?" "It's the wind. Listen to the music. 200 yards away and as clear as if it was only 50 feet. I don't think we could have heard this bell through the phone with the sound going against that wind. If this is the right bell, they must be holding Danny in the other direction," I said. "Then they must have another house here in the community," Natalie replied. "Damn it, come on, Lyman, let's take a walk." Again we swung around the end of the fence over the canal and attempted to gauge the wind in reference to the bell in the store, which rang during wind gusts. We settled on a direction and began walking past all of the houses in that approximate area. Whenever someone was on their porch or we passed others on the little streets, we held hands and walked closely together. We moved away from each other when we resumed our search in earnest. Each time we got a couple hundred feet east of one particular cross street, we could hear the bell in the store ring lightly, and we got a better feel for where we needed to go. On the 4th Street over at the approximate spot was a house that had a BMW and a Mercedes in the driveway. Some of the lights were on inside, but from the street we could see no one moving around. It was very still, and we heard no one talking, and there was no sound from music or TV. A tall wooden fence surrounded the rear half of the house and prevented us from seeing very much inside of the backyard. Between the fence slats, a light from what appeared to be the patio was visible, but the cracks were so small it was impossible to see anything more. We discussed driving the boat over to the canal behind the house, but dismissed that notion for fear we couldn't find it in the dark. A gust of wind carried the now clearer sound of the bell directly to our position and encouraged us that we were in the right place. We talked about whether we should call the sheriff, possibly away from where his son may be held, or to let him check out that house, which could allow these people to kill Danny if he is here and get away. Then, as we were nearly forced to make that decision, a man walked through the front room of the house. He appeared to be the older man from the restaurant who accompanied the other Cubans, though neither of us had a definitive view of him. Natalie went to the neighboring house and grabbed a large landscape brick and joined me behind the two expensive cars. "I'm going to get close to the house," she explained. "When you're ready, call their number. If they answer, tell them something. Anything. Like the bank is closed tomorrow. Whatever, it doesn't matter. If they start acting erratic in the house, break the Beamer's side window with the brick. They usually have loud alarms. I just want to be sure these are the right guys. If they are, we call the sheriff and go home. If they are not the right people, we run like a couple of juvenile delinquents, and the real kidnappers will be grabbed at the other house." Natalie drew her gun and moved as close as she could to get to the front. When she gave the signal, I hit the call button. We both heard it ring inside, and I hung up immediately. I called the sheriff, but he didn't answer. While I was waiting to leave a message, we heard gunfire from where I believed was the other house. We could see two men inside now running around gathering things like they were preparing to leave. I smashed the side window of the BMW, and as Natalie had instructed, and the porch light came on. Natalie then shot the man through the door and put the next shot into the door lock. I ran in right behind her. We both led with our guns through the only inside door that was not open. There, tied in a chair, was the young deputy, gagged with his eyes open as big as baseballs. The older man on one side and the well-dressed woman on the other both had their guns pointed at Danny's head. Natalie waited only a second before she said, "Danny, I was just deciding what your father would want me to do in this situation," she said. She then fired 2 shots in rapid succession. The first put a quarter-size hole in the head of the man, and the second went through the forehead of the young lady, putting an early end to her life of crime. Natalie holstered her weapon like she just finished at the range. She ran over to Danny, who was desperately trying to say something. At the same second, it occurred to me that there was still one man for whom we had not accounted. I turned and only saw the muzzle flash. With much less precision than Natalie, I fired 3 rounds into the chest of the 4th Cuban man. He fell dead. I was puzzled when Natalie rushed towards me. Even an affectionate woman like she is wouldn't need a hug so soon. That is when I felt the heat of my own blood running down my chest. Hope you like that. Thank you.